how do you feel like the modern enterprise teams to signal-based go-to-market?
We should minimize the amount of context we put into models. Working with a lot of enterprise companies is there's just so much information. It's just too easy to put in irrelevant or bad information. It's too hard to just be really specific about what is relevant or timely, recent, important. So it's almost, let's put the minimum in and then hope that minimum doesn't include information that's irrelevant. More often than not, when we just dump context into the model, one piece of information will get overweighted. And then the sales team sees that and they're like, I know this piece of data is not accurate or right. So now I don't trust the entire model.
What was the thing that stick out to you the most when speaking to leaders at Vanta and all these companies?
While I was out getting coffee, I came back. It had gone to Reddit. It found a Data is Beautiful subreddit post about mining safety accidents. It went and found the data from that set, which is a public data set that the US government puts out, and then found all the mines in that data set and then scored all of them. This one is by far, this is the one that has put me over the edge of we are in a different timeline than we were 6 months ago. Everything up till then was like, oh, we're automating things. This was the first example where it felt like, I don't know if I could have done this manually in less than a week.
All right, Jai, how are you doing, man? Thanks
Fantastic.
a lot for having the time to chat today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You've been deep in the trenches of enterprise go-to-market. Honestly, you are one of the few guys that have been sharing so much gold out there with the hands-on tutorials on how to do this and how to do that. So I think today we can create a small masterclass for the people who think that signal-based go-to-market is a simple play. You just have job changes and then you blast people, or you destroy some mailboxes. What is your biggest learning? You made a post recently about that, but how do you feel like the modern enterprise teams to signal-based go-to-market? I'm directly jumping in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main takeaway that's repeatable across every single use case we've found is this concept of examples and just giving a lot of examples to the models and AI models, LLMs, et cetera. But it's essentially just examples and backtesting. When we're helping a company, this works better if you have historical data. If you don't, there's a way around it, but it's not quite as useful. I have two kind of approaches we run with every single customer. One, we start with, give us your last 100 wins, 100 losses, and just look at those examples. And then let's look at the differences between the wins and losses. And this could be for lead level, it could be account level, it could be who picked up a phone versus didn't pick up a phone. All we're actually looking at is good outcomes and bad outcomes, and as many examples as possible. And then what we actually start doing first is we try to go broad on signals for those exact accounts. And so just do a big dump of features that we can give to the model and say, all right, now go find the differences between the good and bad outcomes. And let's get as many possible signals as we can. Let's look at who they were hiring, what types of roles they have at the company, what keywords they have on the website. And this is a process we used to do super manually. Only a year ago, we were doing this completely manually, and it took a month. For one of our customers, it took a month. And yesterday, I did it on a per product level. So it took a month to do it for just account level propensity model. And now, yesterday, I did it in 45 minutes per product with higher area under curve, higher model accuracy in less than 45 minutes. And that ability to generate ML models at scale with lots of features and do the feature engineering for you, that's kind of like the mental model. And I know I just got into a lot of details there, but the specific takeaway is just a lot of examples and then have it back test against your actuals and say, if we had applied this model for the last 6 months, how many accounts would we have missed? How many would we have captured? And just keep doing that loop over and over again until you get a really good outcome that you're happy with.
Sick. And is that going hand in hand with your biggest hot take for the go-to-market landscape at the moment?
Yes. Yeah. I think the context, my biggest hot take right now is we should minimize the amount of context we put into models. And the nuance there is that what I've felt working with a lot of enterprise companies is there's just so much information that it's just too easy to put in irrelevant or bad information. It's too hard to just be really specific about what is relevant or timely, recent, important. You have to put that filter on up front, and that's really hard. So it's almost let's put the minimum in and then hope that minimum doesn't include information that's irrelevant. Because what happens more often than not when we just dump context into the model is one piece of information will get overweighted. And then the sales team sees that and they're like, I know this piece of data is not accurate or right. So now I don't trust the entire model. And that's what we're trying to avoid. You're trying to maximize the likelihood that sales will activate what you're using and take action on it. And what they need for that typically is explainability. They need to understand why you're saying what you're saying, why this is a good fit or a bad fit. You need to be able to show the reasons and have those reasons make sense. And if you have too much context, those reasons are not going to make sense. And it's very similar to when you're building an ML model manually. If you put in a bunch of features that are irrelevant, it might have a correlation with a good outcome, but it doesn't actually mean anything. We had one example where a customer found that their cold call answer rate in California on the West Coast was higher than any of their East Coast states. And that was just a nuance of their team is entirely East Coast, so they just had more hours overlapping with the West Coast people. So it was just a time zone nuance. But the model is saying California answers more, and you don't want that in your model. And as soon as the sales team sees that, they're going to be like, this doesn't make sense. We know that's not true, so we don't trust your model. So your goal is to minimize the amount of bad information in there. And the easiest way to do that is just put less information in there. If you're more targeted about this is context that I know is important, then you should add more context. But that's so much work that I just find it easier to not do it. So minimal context, try to be as streamlined as possible.
Gotcha. But there's a little bit of a nuance in there, right? What's even minimal in that sense? What's the MVP? I feel like both of us builders as well.
Yeah.
When people say, oh yeah, go build MVP. Sure, man. But the whole market is so used to now having fully polished. Yeah. What's I'll call it minimum valuable context in that regard?
Yeah, I generally start with, I just went through this process yesterday, so I have a pretty good mental model right now. I start with the traditional things that we know will matter. So firmographics on an account, conversations you've had with them, transcripts, just take the most recent ones. Don't go too far back. Things like more than 3 months ago are probably not going to be that critical, and just be a little conservative, but just the most basic things that everybody does. Start there and then incrementally add 1 or 2 features at a time and just keep retesting and backtesting. The cost of backtesting is so low that as you go, you'll just continually find 1 or 2 of the 5 ideas that you have are actually relevant. And then you filter out the ones that aren't, keep going. So yesterday I was working on one for one of our customers, that product level scoring, and they had a bunch of hypotheses of what's relevant. And one of them was product reviews. If there's a lot of negative product reviews related to, I can't log in, got locked out of my account, that type of experience, that's correlated with a good fit customer. And we backtested that and showed that wasn't the case. And then the other one that they had was total site visitors. That's just a proxy for total number of users. That one was super predictive on 2 of the 9 products. So we're only going to include it for those 2, not include it for everyone else. And now we have the minimal viable context for that particular set of products. And when we add one more, that'll be the next set of minimal viable context. But I think it's just start with the things you know matter, which are firmographics, really recent information, and then just keep adding things one by one until you get to something you're really happy with.
Gotcha. And this ties back quite nicely to defining your custom signals, right? Like the money-making one, which I feel like before even diving there, first thing first, I used to join the B2B tech world when growth hacking was popular.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see that you test hypothesis like crazy, which is good because not many teams still test hypothesis so rapidly in that manner. So kudos for you in that regard. And that also ties back quite nicely to defining the custom signal for each one of the ventures that you're helping. So what is the mental model there? Like, can you walk us around like how you build the custom signals for your clients?
Yeah. The pattern that we've had the most success with is actually we start with a research step of what are public data sets and public information about these accounts that could be relevant to what we're doing here. And that's really helpful for TAM building. It's really helpful for getting a broad understanding of the market. And then using that, the like really crazy example that I have was we use a skill called last 30 days to do this. Highly recommend if you're in Claude Code to just download it. I'm a huge fan of it. I use it for everything. We're integrating features of it into Deepline right now. But the main thing it does is it searches Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. And those are things that are generally not captured in LLMs. And it does it for the last 30 days. And that's where the name comes from. But what it's really good at finding is public data sets that are relevant, specific, super niche to your use case. And then we combine those with proprietary signals. So take the public signals, combine it with private signals. And then usually the combination of those two is where we get the really big alpha use cases. And the crazy example was a mining safety company that was trying to predict who would need mining safety equipment, score their accounts. And I let the research step go and said, once you're done, go find these accounts in Deepline and build a model out of it. And while I was like out getting coffee, I came back. It had gone to Reddit. It found a Data is Beautiful subreddit post about mining safety accidents. It went and found the data from that set, which is a public data set that the US government puts out, and then found all the mines in that data set and then scored all of them using the model in the paper. It said, here's the predictive model of who's most likely to have a mining safety accident in the next 90 days. And here's why, with explainers on each one. And then connected that to proprietary data for who is the head of safety at that mine. And it did all of this while I was out for coffee. And I came back and I'm like, oh yeah, this is crazy. This one is by far, this is the one that has put me over the edge of we are in a different timeline than we were 6 months ago. Everything up till then was like, oh, we're automating things. This was the first example where it felt like, I don't know if I could have done this manually in less than a week. Like it would have to be my number one priority for a while. And I would have to sit there and think about it. And in 45 minutes, it outperformed anything I could have done. And that felt like the turning point for me. And this is the way we should approach it from now on.
For sure. Wow, okay. Things are moving super fast. Exactly. If you pointed a year back at this time, I feel like the signals as a whole were picking up, right?
Yeah.
And now fast forward, they're being absorbed as pretty much the norm almost, although there are a lot of teams across the world who don't use it yet, but are pressured to go in that route. And this is a nerdy question on my side, but I'm a huge meetup guy. Last year, I hosted a conference for 200 vetted go-to-market leaders and a bunch of other meetups just like you, what you do this year. I want to know some of the juicier stuff from the room, if possible, of course. What was the thing that stick out to you the most when speaking to leaders at Vanta and all these companies? Because you guys been killing it with the meetups. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We're super lucky just to have a good set of folks out here in New York, and everybody's willing to kind of come join and talk about what they're working on. I think the main takeaways, if I have to kind of go back, because the first one we did was in April, and it's kind of funny to see how much things have changed just since April. But thinking back to each of them, the first one was very focused on sales and AI SDR almost. But I think what I learned from that segment was that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to what you're doing. The concept of an AI SDR, everybody keeps asking for it, and it exists today. There are people who have all the tasks automated, but they don't think of it as just one product that does all of it, because the individual tasks are too unique, different, specialized to particular segments of the market for one product to be able to do it well. So your goal is to break down like, all right, what does an SDR do? And let's break it down into what are they spending the most time on? And then let's go one at a time and automate that particular part of the function. So if you look at a company like owner.com, research was the biggest time sink that they were spending time on. And I think it was like 30 plus minutes per account. And they're trying to do 20, 30 calls a day. You can't do 30 minutes per account. So just automating that process a little bit better up front, they got a huge time savings there. Owner again fell into the same, they arrived at the same conclusion for the examples takeaway I had earlier of just throw a bunch of data at Claude and see what it comes up with. And the model they did was most likely to pick up a phone. So if we cold called this individual at this exact time, what's the likelihood that they'll pick up the phone? And then let's stack rank all of our leads by that. And they got about 3x higher pickup rate or connect rate by re-ranking based on other signals that they have. And the joke that YG had was, I don't know ML. I'm just going to throw data in here and see if Claude can help me. And eventually he just iterated through and then got to a model that was good. And the specifics of the model don't actually matter that much because you can backtest it and say, hey, for our last 6 months, we would have caught most of the good leads that we wanted and we would have excluded bad ones. And that's all you're really trying to do. You're never going to get statistical significance. So I think those are the two main ones that I think of. Yeah, just examples will throw more, if you're not sure what to do, throw examples at the problem and see what happens. And then everyone tries to go too big initially and try to do too much of, hey, I'm going to do a full go-to-market agent. That's too big of a problem to take on at once. Break it into smaller pieces. That's what Vanta did. That's what LangChain did. That's what Owner does. That's what everybody does, is data quality, and then break it into smaller problems and try to take just one problem at a time.
I love that. I love that. And it's putting me to ask, because obviously you see how enterprise sales works whenever you are already there. But you also do enterprise sales, right?
Yeah.
You have the events, and they're probably the middle of the funnel or top of the funnel for you too, right? So how did you manage to build your own signal-based engine?
Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, so how do you build your enterprise signal-based engine? That's pretty much it.
Yeah, the learnings that I have on the event side is the bigger events are very good for brand awareness, for building a community, for PLG. It's really good. But when you're thinking about enterprise, the quality of interaction matters a lot more. And so a smaller event is going to be way better. And look, I think everybody told me this, but it's one of those things that you hear it and then you don't really register it until you experience it. You're like, oh, this is what everybody was talking about type experience. And I think that the signals that we're looking at, a lot of them are still around hiring. I think the joke is hiring and new hires and job postings are played out, but they're not. It's just too high of a signal. I know that if someone's hiring a growth engineer, a applied AI engineer with a GTM kind of subtitle, or member of technical staff GTM, those three roles are like super high signal for us, because that means they've already started the traditional GTM engineering work and they realize that they're missing something. And that's usually production go-to-market systems. The gap between the traditional clay-based GTM engineer is scalability and production engineering best practices, observability, testing, version control, all of these things that don't really matter until they do. And those are the teams that we generally see really high adoption with, because they have a preference for API first, SDK, CLI. They don't really want to log into a UI. In fact, they get mad at us when we make them log into a UI for something. So what's the minimum that we can provide to them to make sure that they're scaling? And then we get a lot of feedback inbound of, hey, we want to use Deepline, but we need better observability. We need more non-technical user interfaces for our team to be able to see results. And so we're gathering that feedback and trying to figure out what that looks like without abandoning our core user base of more technical engineers who are more focused on the API, mostly want to build their own interfaces on top of us. But for enterprise, we kind of have to toe this line of, all right, what signals matter of, all right, is that the perfect fit for us right now, or should we just keep focusing on where we're getting drop pull?
Yeah. No, I love that, man, because of the fact that I think you hit the nail on the head without even knowing, because of the fact that on LinkedIn, at least, I keep on seeing people claiming that funding doesn't work and hiring doesn't work and acquisition doesn't work and this and that doesn't work. But all of those signals are just the beginning of the journey, right? It's not like you're going to close the deal anymore based on the fact that someone just have budget in place. In fact, we make one research that will go live this week, depending on when you watch it. But I think Series A companies within 45 days or something like this have a new hire after they receive a funding round, which means the hypothesis that you can set up in order for them to become relevant for your own signal-based motion is quite high. But because of people are trashing it, others believe quite quickly that it's not viable. So I think that's the right way to approach it. That's what I was trying to aim after.
Yeah, I think what we're feeling is just it's noisy because everybody else is hitting them with probably lower quality messaging than you would like. So you're just getting bombarded when you start a new job. You're getting bombarded when you do a Series A. And that doesn't change the fact that it is useful. It just means it's noisier, it's harder to get through. But if you get through with an event or with something that's actually adding value to that customer, the signal's still there. I just think that if you've made the mistake of saying you're hiring a UX person on LinkedIn and you get 40 texts, 30 LinkedIn messages, and you're like, that's not what I wanted. I wanted a trusted recommendation. I wanted a referral. I don't want 50 spam text messages because I posted that we're looking for UX help. And trying to separate those two is where I think people are getting stuck.
I think it's still because of the fact that teams just don't know how to make the right copywriting formula to embed the signal accordingly to it. A
Yeah.
lot of the teams that I'm talking still with is going after the signal itself or trying to book it in. And I'm like, okay, it's like going on a date with someone, or let's say that we go out in a bar and you see someone that is a third person. We do know the context of both of it. So we both know what to say to him, but we'll never mention the awkward part,
Yeah.
right? Because it's more like a given. So that's how I also approach building messages for our own signal based
Yeah.
outbound. Okay. And to go there, you guys obviously started recently, but you already had a lot of mistakes with your own go-to-market efforts, right? So what are some of those mistakes?
Yeah, you touched on the exact one that was the most painful, and it was copywriting. I think
There you go.
when you get started, it's hard not to just AI slop things and let's try 50 different versions and see what happens. And that obviously didn't work. I think the big learning was personalization and relevance are not the same thing. And like you were saying, I got an email from a friend of mine who's looking for help with their outbound, and it's like, I noticed you liked X, Y, and Z, or you commented on this post. Or I saw one that was like, I read your blog post and then noticed that you like mountain biking. And I'm like, that stuff is, maybe it worked 6 months ago, a year ago. I know there were like random use cases where it did, but that is actually hurting you. And it feels like you're making something relevant because it feels, oh yeah, this is so specific to this person that it must be relevant. And the difference between personalization and relevance is relevance should matter even if the signal that you're talking about isn't there. And that was like the big mental model shift. And I'm a big fan of the message market fit framework from Kellen Caspear, or whoever invented it. I don't know. I got it from Kellen. But that was like a kind of turning point for me where I was like, oh, this makes way more sense. Like, yeah, what is the pain point that they have? It's very clear. We know this audience. We're doing the exact same things as them every day. We know what parts talk about our job. We should talk about that, not about, hey, you liked a post from a competitor. So the separating the signal and the relevance is a hard thing to grok, especially for founders, I think. I talk to a lot of technical founders, and this is probably the thing that I see most often is they're just like, oh yeah, this is what we're talking about. This is what I'm going to talk about. But yeah, you have to separate those. And I think that was the main one. And then second one is just being really narrow on your ICP. Another one where everybody tells you and then you don't do it and then it hurts you and you're like, okay, cool. This was a painful lesson. I wish we had listened to what everybody told me to do over and over again. And the more narrow you make it, the easier it is to be good for that audience. And I think we still serve the average non-technical GTM engineer, but we're definitely getting more traction, and nobody's really built for an engineer who does go-to-market versus a go-to-market engineer. That distinction of, I'm building production systems, I want version control, I need an SDK that easily integrates into other places that I want to use your tooling. Yeah. That market was not tapped when we started doing what we're doing. Whereas go-to-market engineering, there's tons of tools. And so I think, what are we really good at also? We have a very technical team, and I'm very lucky there. That part we actually understand better. We understand development best practices maybe better than the average go-to-market tool company. So where's our expertise? Where's the market gap? And being more narrow about that and saying no to customers that aren't a perfect fit for that right now. In the long run, I think as coding agents get better, we feel very good about where we're positioned, because that technical complexity should go away. But I think when we tried to go broad, we were talking to CROs. A CRO doesn't care about their enrichment tooling. That wasn't the right person to bring in. And I made up some narrative about how the CRO is going to introduce us to the right person and it'll have more weight because it came from them. And that's true, but it's not, at the end of the day, they're not going to care. They're going to do whatever they want to do for the best product, for the best solution. And that's what you should compete on.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. And it's also, I've been there too, reiterated a few times. And honestly, you only get there when you stack the loses.
Yeah.
You lose one time, you lose second time, third time you win. So it's just a natural thing.
Yeah. Well, it would be so much easier if you could just hear it and not have to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
Not us. We'll do it the hard way.
Okay, cool. Because we need to wrap it up.
Yeah.
My last question would be about an underrated advice that you wish you can give to the audience, and particularly to someone who is trying to build their signal-based go-to-market engine.
Yeah. I think there's something that I've been trying to encapsulate, and It's essentially the product adoption, product usage is really the only signal that matters at the end of the day. And people will say that it's a good fit. They'll say that this is what they want. And it doesn't matter if they're not actually using the product. And then product velocity is the fastest way to build that. And there's all this other stuff about go-to-market. And product at the end of the day is what we're doing. If you're doing services, you still have a product, and the velocity at which you improve your services matters as well. But one guy, when we were doing fundraising, one of the co-founders of Superhuman mentioned this, and it didn't make sense to me at the time because we were doing enterprise sales. And now a year later, I'm like, oh yeah, he was 100% right. And we were looking at all these signals that didn't actually correlate with adoption and product usage. They correlated with what we thought made sense. And that gap is actually much bigger than I thought. And then there's this guy, Rob Snyder, who also has a very similar approach. Yeah, and it's a pull. If it's not on their to-do list, if it's not an action item that they're going to do no matter what, it doesn't matter. And you're not in the right place. And we struggled with that initially. I wish we'd listened to those two pieces of advice a lot earlier. We could have saved so much time. So those are the ones that hopefully somebody hears that and doesn't do the same thing we did, which is learning the hard way. But those two keep coming up as things that stand out as really important concepts that are hard to hear any other way or learn any other way.
Yeah, for sure. Just to add in on top of that, because that's something I've been seeing over the summer, there are two types of people. There are the very activated people that will say on a call on Monday, yes, let's do it. I'll start the trial on the same day, convert on Friday after the trial. Yeah. And then there's these guys who will say, yes, let's do it. Months pass. So I guess that kind of goes nicely with what you say here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to say it because of the fact that the customer journeys are not linear. And we wish everyone has 4-day closing rate, but that's not the opportunity. And sometimes it's not inside what you offer and how you offer, but on the other side, it's also the priorities of the other guys in that sense.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to yet another episode. I will leave Jai's LinkedIn below, so as a link to Deepline, so you guys can check it out. Any last words?
No, yeah. Thanks for having me. If folks want to try out Deepline, we can add a promo code as well. New user usually will get you through the starting process.
Yep. Or just sending a message with the link of the podcast can get it done too.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for listening. See you next week.
Thanks.
Peace.
Bye.